Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Lucas Hnath's play, Hillary and Clinton. So this is an interesting play. It's a political play, as you might guess, but actually, so the political elements are fine. They're interesting as far as they go, largely revolving around the 2008 election and Hillary Clinton's sort of contest, mainly with Barack Obama, but also the difficulty she experienced in terms of like figuring out what, if anything, Bill Clinton should be doing as part of this campaign. But I think the thing that makes Hillary and Clinton an interesting play is the setup that Hnath creates, because it's kind of a Tom Stoppard style setup, but I also think it's kind of a Bertolt Brecht setup. So these are the two sort of big influences I see here, because this is actually not about the 2008 election that we know. This is set on a different planet, or different dimension, maybe. Something like this, parallel universe, something like this, in which basically everything is exactly the same, but it's not. So that's, I think, a really interesting point. So part of the reason that I say this is kind of Brechtian, one of the things that Bertolt Brecht talks about with his epic theater is that you should set plays about contemporary issues in historical settings to create that difference, that gap between what the audience knows and experiences from their own life and what's going on stage, but with enough overlap that the audience will be prompted to think critically about their own circumstances. So one of the things Hnath says in his first set of author's notes, because he wrote this in 2008, and then it was revived in 2016, or really it got its first premiere. It got its premiere in 2016, and then it was revived again in 2017, 2018. But in his 2008 author's note, what he says here is, it might be tempting, very tempting, to play these characters as imitations of the real deal. An actor playing Bill Clinton might be very tempted to mimic Bill's signature Southern drawl and lip bites, just as an actor playing Hillary might want to emulate her cadences and laugh. Don't do it. Do not play for easy recognition. Don't imitate. Don't even try to cast actors who look like these people. Instead, imagine that the audience watching this play has never heard of the Clintons and that this is an opportunity to create these characters anew. And then there's a comparison here with Henry V and by Shakespeare, and how audiences will have no idea what Henry V looked like, what his mannerisms were, etc., etc. And he ends that comparison by saying, treat this play in the same way. Play the text and not the persona that exists outside the text, so that you might elevate these characters beyond a facile tabloid reality. So why do I say that's Brechtian? Well, because the goal here, the goal of this whole setup that Hnath gives us, that I'm going to talk you through just a little bit more in just a little bit, the goal of this whole setup of this isn't the world that you know, this is a parallel world, that is to create distance, so that this is not our Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, etc., etc. These are other people whose stories and circumstances just happen to exactly match those. Does it succeed at creating distance in the way that, say, when Brecht wants to comment on mid-20th century German politics, he sets his story in the 30 Years' War in Mother Courage and Her Children? I don't know that Hnath is entirely successful with that, in part because once you get past this sort of introduction, it's very easy to forget the whole, this is a different reality bit. because it's not necessarily needed for the play itself beyond the sort of prologue speech. So I think it's an interesting technique, and Hnath is very clearly, from the author's notes, concerned that this is not just, this is a realistic portrayal of what happened. This is clearly not meant to be a testimonial play or something like this, but it's also not clear, again, for most of the play, that you actually need that setup. Like, if this was just if you drop the introduction, which again I'm going to talk about in just a second, and just did the rest of this play, there's no particularly good reason why you shouldn't be thinking of this as the Hillary, Bill, and Barack that we know. It's not that crucial. So that's, I think, an interesting problem of this type of setup, where you're clearly commenting on the world that we know, but you're trying to create distance, but the distancing technique may or may not be effective. But I think the Stoppard elements are more interesting, more effective in the setup itself. So we start, the play basically takes place in a hotel room. We have the scene description, and then the last bit of the scene description says, an actress walks out onto the stage, the house lights remain at full, she holds up a coin. And then we get this opening speech, this kind of prologue. So I'm going to read you the whole prologue, and then we'll talk about some of the interesting Stoppard influences here. So she says, this is a coin, and it has a president on one side, and I don't know what on the other. Now, if I were to take this coin and flip it, say, 5 times, I might get something like heads, 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 tails, heads, right? And I think we can all agree that if I were to flip it another 5 times, it would be pretty unlikely that I'd get that same exact heads, 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 tails, heads. But if I were to flip it 100 times, then sure, I would probably get that same order of flips once, probably even more than once. But if I were to flip this coin an infinite number of times, well, then I'd get that same sequence over and over and over and over. So what people can take from that is that if the universe is infinite, and some people say it is, then that means that everything that happens in it happens many times over and over. And that means that means there are an infinite number of planet Earths, all kinds of planet Earths. Planet Earths like this one, and planet Earths that are nothing like this one. And planet Earths that are like this one but slightly different, and on and on. So then imagine, okay, that light years away from here, on one of those other planet Earths that's like this one but slightly different, that there's a woman named Hillary. And this woman Hillary is trying to become president of a country called the United States of America. And Hillary, she has a husband named Bill, and Bill was once himself president. And imagine it's Sunday, and the month is January, and the year is 2008 on this other planet Earth. And this is supposed to be a hotel room. And now imagine that I'm that woman named Hillary who lives far away from here and who's trying to become president of the United States. And I've been campaigning for close to a year now. I haven't slept. I'm tired. I'm very tired. I have a long day ahead of me, events and speeches, and the state of New Hampshire will vote on Tuesday in something called a primary. Enter Mark. And that's Mark. He helps run the campaign. And every time I turn on the television, there's someone on it saying that I'm going to lose. And I change the channel, and there's another one. And I look at the numbers, and I look at the polls, and I look at what they're saying in the papers, and everyone says that I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose. And I think I'm going to lose. And then we enter the dialogue. So, what's cool here, we've got a number of elements that I think are really reflective of Tom Stoppard's very distinctive dramaturgical style. And I think the first sort of hint that we have that Stoppard is an influence here is the opening with the coin toss. This question of, if I flip this coin 5 times, I could get this sequence. The more I flip it, the more likely I will get that sequence over and over again. This echoes the opening coin toss scene from Stoppard's most famous play, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. Because in that play, in that scene, Guildenstern is sort of trying to work through the probabilities of coin flipping in an existentially uncertain universe in which you may have an infinite number of coin flips, and what that might mean for their existence. And he even sort of posits that he and Rosencrantz have been frozen in time, that they are repeatedly experiencing the same coin being tossed and coming up heads over and over again. So that question of the probability of coin tosses and what that could tell us about existence is a famous scene from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. But the other element that we have going on here is this very distinctive blend of philosophy and more sort of experimental or postmodern sciences, right? Is this idea, for instance, that if I were to flip this coin an infinite number of times, well, then I'd get the same sequence over and over and over and over again. And if the universe is infinite, and some people say it is, then that means that everything that happens in it happens many times over and over. This is a philosophical concept. One of the most famous proponents of this was Friedrich Nietzsche, who called this the eternal return. The idea that history, time, experience, the universe, whatever you want to call it, is infinite. And so what you get is a continual repetition. That because it is infinite, the same events will play out over and over and over again in exactly the same way. So you've got that philosophical gesture, but you've also got this idea that there's an infinite number of planet Earths, some massively different, some very similar with only minor differences, etc., etc. This is multiverse theory, which is a kind of, I don't know, experimental science or postmodern science, very much a sort of speculative idea, but this is a scientific idea. And so this is very typical of Tom Stoppard's style, this idea of blending philosophical ideas with cutting edge scientific ideas and sort of mashing them together to explore something about the world we live in. And in this case, what Hnath is exploring is the question of American politics and how politics works in the US. And so we've got these elements where Bill and Hillary debate the best way to run and why she's not doing well in the polls. They have these debates about, like he thinks that the thing she needs to do is to be more sort of warm and human, that she needs to present herself more vulnerably, she needs to be more sort of open, and she takes a different position. She asserts, no, I have the most experience, I have policy ideas, this is what I'm running on. I'm running on my ability to do the job. And he says, people don't care about your ability to do the job. What they care about is electing a human being. And so that's one of the big debates that they have. They also have big debates about strategy. Should Bill be involved in this campaign? And if so, in what capacity? Hillary's opponent, Barack, offers her a deal where if she drops out before the race in New Hampshire, she will be promised a spot as his running mate. There's big debates between Hillary, the campaign manager Mark, and Bill about whether or not she should take that deal. So we get these sort of big political ideas undergirded by these philosophical ideas and these scientific ideas about the possibility of a multiverse, the possibility of eternal returns and infinite existence, etc., etc. But again, ultimately, like I like that stuff. I really think that's an interesting setup. But ultimately, if you kind of drop that element, if you drop most of that prologue and just sort of start with, if you start basically just from the part in this prologue, even if you just started from, I've been campaigning for close to a year now. I haven't slept. I'm tired, very tired. If you drop everything that says this is an alternate planet, an alternate existence, alternate reality, there's very little else in this play that actually would prevent you from just playing this as straight sort of documentary theater. So I think it's an interesting technique. Is it fully effective? Possibly not as much.